ahead and get started. We got, looks like 6 on Zoom and 1 in person. So I think we can get started. Guys, when I do these classes on Zoom, I am really bad at watching the chat box. So if you guys have any questions, just unmute, just interrupt me. And that's probably the best way to get your questions answered as we go through. Okay. And feel free to interrupt in any time. Happy to stop rather than wait for the end for questions. Okay. So today's class is purchase listing agreements. So make sure I open the right class here. Yeah. Okay. So today's class is listing contracts, how to take a listing. I'm not doing a .loop class, but hopefully you guys all know how to use .loop, or you can get trained on .loop separately. So basically where I'm going to start is I've already created my loop. This is just a generic loop for the class. You guys will have it filled out for your oh, their screen night. Can you guys on Zoom see? Can you guys on Zoom see my screen?
I can.
Okay, we're having TV problems in here. Okay, hopefully this works now. Okay, all right. So okay, so you guys will create your loop. You'll name it with the property address, and you guys are going to put all the right forms in. I think we got it, Brian. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're going to start with the consumer guide to agency relationship. The consumer guide to agency I'm sorry, let me stop for a moment. I'm going to talk to you guys as if you're the seller. So this is how I present it to the sellers. Sometimes I might step out of the role and talk to you as agents, but I'll try to do this as I would for a seller. So the consumer guide to agency relationship. This is not a contract, but I'm going to ask you to sign it today. And the purpose of this is to outline how I work as a real estate agent in the state of Ohio. I can represent a seller, and this is a list of all my fiduciary duties to you as a seller. I may represent you as a buyer too. If you guys are looking to buy a house, I can still represent you as a buyer, and these are my fiduciary responsibilities for the buyer. And then dual agent is when I represent both parties. And how does that relationship work? When I represent you as a seller, I have a duty of confidentiality, looking out for your best interest, promoting your best interest, loyalty, disclosing any material facts, maintaining confidential information, things like that. Then this goes on to talk about working with Keller Williams as the brokerage, and this is their agency policy. The brokerage may be a dual agent, even if I'm not, and all that means is that I'll be representing you as a seller, and somebody else from the brokerage may be representing the buyer. In that case, the brokerage will be the dual agent. There's also a fair housing statement that lists all the protected classes, and I'm going to ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to sign here. Again, this is not a contract. This is just a receipt, so that if I ever get audited by the state of Ohio, I can show them that I did present this consumer guide to agency relationship to you at our first meeting. Okay, any questions about that so far? All right, moving on to our listing agreement. So this is the start of what would actually be our listing agreement, our contract. And it's an exclusive right to sell. And all that means is that when you hire me, you're only hiring me during that protected period. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller's name go here, that you guys are the owner of the property at this address. We'll fill in the address here. We'll have a listing price. We're going to fill that in here. And then our listing dates. I always take my listings for 6 months. You guys, I'm stepping out of the talking to you guys as agents now. You guys can decide however long you guys want to list it for, but the start date goes here, the end date goes here. When I list it for 6 months, I always tell the seller, I always say I take all my listings for a 6 month period. I have no intention of holding on to your listing for 6 months. I plan to sell it much quicker than that. The reason I do 6 months, to be totally honest with you, is because I've been doing this for 17 years, and 17 years ago, it took 6, 9 months, 12 months to sell a house. Today it's different. So, just let me know if the TV goes out again. So, because I'm not okay.
When that date changes, the listing date,
Mhm.
that listing date changes, you do an addendum? to that whole thing, or
If
you
you're
just-
changing the listing date before the listing goes active,
Yeah,
you can change it before it goes active. Just change it and have it initialed.
you don't have to do an addendum.
Yeah, I mean, you could, but I would just do, I would just cross it off, change the date, have it initialed. You can always change the date. The other thing, let me talk to you guys for a second about the dates to the start date, because this is something that's coming up a lot lately, and I get a lot of questions from agents about the clear cooperation rule from NAR. That's the rule that says once you start advertising a property, you have to put it in the MLS within 24 hours. And I've had very lengthy conversations with the MLS rules department about this. Here's the thing. Let's say this is a real listing that we're doing now. So today's.
Yeah, like I have one that's dated Thursday.
Yeah, so today's the 14th. Let's say, okay, let's use Kim's example. We're gonna start a listing on Thursday, the 16th. Can I advertise it now? Can I put the sign in the yard now? Absolutely. It's not a violation of the MLS rule if I start doing that now, because I don't have a listing right now. So if I put the sign in the yard right now and I sell the house right now, I better have a good understanding with the seller that that I've earned my commission, even though I sold it today, the 14th, because our listing agreement says I'm getting paid a commission, but only starting the 16th.
Oh.
So
So you can sell it like that.
you can, then in that case, if it goes under contract, you're also not putting it in the MLS.
Okay.
So
So if I put on like our Facebook page coming soon.
yeah, you can do coming soons. So this came up because I drive home every day past the house in Shaker Heights. Now it's finally listed, but for months and months, there was a sign in the yard from a local brokerage, and it was not in the MLS. And I had my friends and family and clients calling me and saying, what about this house on Fairmount Boulevard? And I'm looking and it's not available. I don't know. It's not available. I got sick of it. And I said, you know what? They're breaking the rules of NAR clear cooperation. I called the MLS to find out they're actually not breaking the clear cooperation rule, because they didn't have a listing agreement. They had a handshake agreement with the seller that they could put a sign in the yard. And if they got a sign call, then they could, sell the house and earn a commission. But there was no listing agreement. So because of that, they were not in violation of the clear cooperation. So that's that. So if your listing that's coming up on the 16th, right? If you put a sign in today, then you do have to follow the clear cooperation rules, and it has to be in the MLS within 24 hours of the listing start date, which means by Friday, it has to be in the MLS. So that 48-hour rule is out the window.
Of not having it in the MLS and just putting a sign out
To create that coming soon that we're not allowed to use anymore. Yeah, so in that case, that particular house was owned by St. Jude Hospital. So I think that agent was doing it as kind of a help it, like almost like a charity type of thing. So I don't know that you would put a sign out for months ahead of time, but if you put a sign out today for your listing that's coming on Thursday, you certainly can do that and you're not in violation. It doesn't go in the MLS till Thursday. Normally we have the 48-hour rule. But once that sign goes in the yard, it's, forget 48 hours, it's 24 hours. So Thursday, you have a sign in the yard, it's got to be in there by Friday. Make
So
sense?
if I don't have a sign, it has to
Then
be
you can-
48 hours.
By Monday, yeah. Business days, yeah.
I guess I just. I'm just, I always have to go devil's advocate. What is the point of putting a sign in there and not having it on that MLS? And not having a sign?
I agree with you. I don't know what the point is. The
I thought
point,
maybe I was missing it.
no, the point might be just to
What's
try to
the-
get, just to get sign calls, maybe pick up a buyer from it. Okay. All right, so moving on to the next paragraph, exclusive right to sell. So this is an exclusive right to sell. I'm now talking to you guys as a seller. All that means is that I'm the only agent that you'll hire during that listing period. If I sell the property during that period, I'm earning a commission of, in this case, it says 6%, but we don't have a standard, so you can make it 10%, you can make it 2%, whatever you guys agree to. Okay. If you have a minimum fee, it's usually like $3,500 or something like that. That's really for inexpensive houses, but and then there's also the $295 additional commission. So you're paying in this instance,
So how do we explain that to them?
that's the commission. Like my commission is 6% plus $295.
But how do we explain the 295 for Keller Williams?
It's just part of the commission. What do you have to explain? I've never had to explain. I mean,
Because I would say that I pay my brokerage out of my percentage.
Yeah.
And the Cobra, so then I feel silly saying there's an additional 295 for Keller Williams.
I've never been
I've never
questioned.
Questioned either.
Yeah,
just-
and I charge more myself personally on my own deals. I charge $399. We have agents in our office that are charging $499.
Mhm.
I can tell you with my $399, I've never been questioned on it. So $295, I don't think.
I just like to know in my mind what that,
You can just say that's just it's an
just tell me what it is,
it's
I guess.
it's just commission. That's all I have to say about it. There's nothing more to say about it other than that's part of the commission. The commission is,
Commission, when I pay them, out of my commission? And I pay a percentage.
I wouldn't even talk to your seller about what you're paying the brokerage.
I know, but isn't that commission?
6% plus $295 is the commission on the property.
Okay.
I mean, I've never had to explain it any more than that.
I know, but I want to know in my mind what it is.
For you as an agent, what is it? I mean, that's the brokerage charges a flat fee of $295. That's part of how we're staying profitable. Okay. Cooperation. I'm agreeing to cooperate with other brokers. And so from that 6% commission, I'm going to pay the buyer's agent 3% on the first 100, 2% on the balance. Okay. You, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are not paying anything extra if there's another agent or another brokerage that brings a buyer. That 3% on the first 100, 2% on the balance, or whatever you guys want it to be, is coming out of the 6%. So that's how I explain it. That being said, again, stepping out of the role, talking to you guys as agents, this paragraph's changing as part of that lawsuit, and we're working on a new listing agreement with our attorneys now, and the date that we have to be compliant is going to be August 17th. That's what the courts have said. We have to be compliant by August 17th. I've already started working with our attorney, and I'm hoping that by July, mid to end of July, we'll have everything compliant so that we're not waiting till the very last second.
So why? What is different about that?
What's different about,
I mean, we're still saying what we're paid.
right, there's going to be extra language about commissions are negotiable. We're going to have it totally separated out. So instead of a total commission of 6%, it's going to say the listing agent is getting this much. There might be other language about, I'm not sure exactly how we're gonna working through it with the attorney, but it's gonna say the listing agent's getting this much, the buyer's agent's getting that much. There may be some extra language that if you're a dual agent or if it's an unrepresented buyer, that the commission is that much. So there may be 3 spots for
Okay.
commissions, but we're working through all that. And I hope by mid to end July, we'll have it compliant with our brokerage so that by our deadline of August 17th, that we're already doing it. All right. You, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're giving me the authorization to market the property. Here's how I market the property. First of all, I'm going to put a sign in the yard. I'm going to put it on the multiple listing service, and that's how other agents will find your house for sale. From there, it's going to get syndicated to hundreds of different websites, including all the big ones that the buyers are looking at, like Zillow and Redfin, Realtor.com, and all the other brokerages websites as well. I'm going to take photos of the property and I'm going to plaster those photos all over the web. And the reason I do that is because that's how buyers find your house is online these days. There'll also be a lockbox on the property. I'll make flyers. I'll, if you have a single property website, you can go through everything that you guys do to market your property. What I usually say with the fair housing paragraph is there's fair housing laws. Here's a list of all the protected classes. If you'd like me to go through them, I can. I hope that we don't need to talk about that. Basically, if we find a ready, willing, and able buyer, that's what we need to worry about and make sure that we're not discriminating. Most of the time, that is sufficient of a conversation. Seller disclosures. You're going to have 2 disclosures that you're going to be required by law to complete. And depending on the house, you may only say 1. There's a residential property disclosure form. Every seller in the state of Ohio is required to fill out the residential property disclosure form. And it's fairly straightforward. It's 6 pages. It asks you a question. You answer the question. There's always a line to explain that, yes, there was a roof leak. I ripped off the whole roof and put on a brand new roof and no problem since. That's disclosure number 1. Disclosure number 2 is the lead-based paint disclosure. That's a federal disclosure. Any house built prior to 1978, we have to fill out that lead paint disclosure. So obviously, if the house is built later than 1978, you can skip that part of the conversation.
So, but if the seller lives out of town, they haven't lived in the property in a couple of years, they still have to fill it out specifically?
Every seller in the state of Ohio has to fill out a residential property disclosure, with the exception, there's seven exceptions. So if they, and I'm going to get to that form next soon. Form is coming up soon. There are 7 exceptions: bank owned, trustee sales, court ordered sales. There's an exemption. But yes, if your client is an investor, a lot of investors say, and a lot of agents say, that don't have to fill out a property disclosure because you're an investor who's never lived in the property. That is not true. You are still required to fill it out, and you're required to fill out those disclosures to the best of your ability, to anything that you have knowledge of. So just because you check the box that says there's no mold in the property, that means you're not putting a warranty on that, right? You're not saying 100% there's no mold in the property. You're saying, to my knowledge, there's no mold. I haven't been in my attic in years, so I don't know if there's mold up there. But if I was selling my house today, I'd check no. And then the buyer's got to do their due diligence, and if they find mold, then we have a conversation about it. Doesn't mean.
The first one says you haven't lived there.
Right.
You put in there, you haven't lived in the property since whenever, so you're saying you haven't lived there.
Right, exactly. So if they're investors, if they're flippers, if it was a rental property, they still have to fill out those disclosures unless they qualify for one of the 7 exemptions, which will come to.
Investors too, some of them that I've gotten, they write as is and draw a line through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, those haven't gone through, but what do I do if we do get those
when I see somebody strike through the whole page and say as is or no knowledge or whatever, sometimes these investors write on there. I always go back to the agent and ask them to fill it out. Now, the law with disclosures in Ohio is a little bit goofy. You're required to do it. You're required to fill it out. And I want to see our clients always fill it out. And I hope we're explaining that to our clients, that they fill it out to the best of their knowledge. But the law in Ohio also says that if the buyer is not provided with disclosures, they have 30 days to terminate. The contract and our contingencies within the contract are almost meaningless at that point. Anything that you decide during that 30 days because you don't have disclosures, you can terminate. But after 30 days, the buyer understands they're accepting that property as is. So that's how the law in Ohio is. So if you get something like that,
So we can
and-
still go through with it, we just can cancel it.
Yeah.
Until the day of close, but we have to know that.
correct,
You can't see them after that because you accepted.
you understood that you're
you
buying it.
understood that you were buying something without disclosure.
Correct. Yeah. But that being said, we should still be explaining to our sellers that they're required to fill it out. Okay.
Yeah. But we still- but I've just, there's been a couple of offers we've been writing with my investors
Mhm.
and the selling disclosures are.
Yeah. All right. Confidentiality. So I always just tell my clients, listen, everything I learn about you is confidential. That's my fiduciary responsibility to you, is to keep things confidential unless the law requires I disclose something. When would the law require me to disclose something that is otherwise confidential is if it's a material defect or a material fact about the sale. And the example I usually use with the seller is, let's just say that you never had a basement sewer backup, and so you didn't put it on the disclosures, and tomorrow your sewer backs up. You do a great job cleaning it up, and you tell me, Rick, it happened, but nobody will ever know the difference. Now that I know about that, I'm gonna have to I'm required to disclose that. By the way, if that happens, I'm probably firing my client too. I mean, if it happens that they're not willing to disclose it after we discuss that it's something that needs to be disclosed, I'm probably just firing the client because that's not somebody I want to work with who's going to be breaking the laws. But that's when I would be required to break that confidentiality is if the law requires and that basement backup is
So
a.
what happens if you know somebody that bought the property? And it was not disclosed with the new,
Say that again. Sorry, you,
okay, so you fired the client
uh-huh.
and somebody else became the seller's agent.
Mhm.
And you knew the buyer's agent. And it never got disclosed that the basement backed up.
Well, if it's not your deal, you should not be talking to anybody about it. So if you fired that client, you fired them, they hired me, I'm the new listing agent, and we found a buyer, and you know who that buyer agent is, and it's not you, then you shouldn't be, discussing anything about that deal with anybody. Now, if you have a buyer, and if you end up being the one who has the buyer for it, you should be disclosing, hey, by the way, not on the disclosures, but I know about the basement backup, or I know that there was mold in the attic. Okay. Electronic surveillance. This just says that, so when I get to this paragraph, I just ask the sellers, do you have any cameras or audio recordings in the property? They're going to say yes or no. You're going to check the box accordingly. If they do have anything, what's important to tell them is that in the state of Ohio, it's a felony to listen to a conversation that you're not a party to, which means if I'm the seller and you're coming through with your client and you're alone in the house with your client, you guys are having a conversation. We're not party to that conversation. We're not there in that conversation with you. It's a felony for us to be recording that conversation. So you need to make sure that if they do have surveillance, just tell them to turn off any audio on that. They can record video. There's nothing illegal about recording video, but audio is illegal. And at the same time, when I'm representing a buyer, I usually tell my buyers, just let's be careful what we talk about in the house, because Because there's cameras everywhere, right? I mean, and I don't want to trust that they're not listening in, but I would advise on listings, disable the audio recording because that is a felony to listen to any conversation that you're not a party to. Excluded fixtures, anything in this that's attached to the house, the state of Ohio says it belongs to the real estate. That anything attached to the property. So that means your light fixtures, your plumbing fixtures, your carpet that's attached, not an area rug. Area rug is personal property, but if the carpet is installed with tack strips or however they install it, it's attached, that's a fixture. Landscaping is a fixture. So I've seen sellers rip out a rose bush because they love that rose bush that they have in the yard and they're going to take it to their new house and they dig it up, and we've had problems with that. Landscaping is fixtures. So anything that's attached to the property. If it's not attached, like an area rug, like a basketball hoop that's not poured in concrete, that's like on the wheel type of thing, those are personal property. That's not required to stay. Do you have any fixtures that you're planning to take with you to your new home? No, great. I fill in the word none here. Yes, I want to take this chandelier with me. And if they say yes, there's something that they want, a fixture that they want to take, I give them two options. The best option is, hey, why don't you take down that chandelier now? Go to Home Depot, get a $20 light fixture, pop it up there. The buyer's never going to see that chandelier. It's no longer a fixture to the property, and you're selling it with a different light fixture. That's my preference because you can tell somebody that that fixture is excluded, but they love that chandelier. Now they want it. So I would prefer take out that fixture now, replace it, and then sell it with the new fixture. If they're not willing to do that, that's fine. You can put in here dining room chandelier under excluded fixtures. Okay, make sure you put in the MLS remarks that you're excluding that. In the broker remarks, you can say exclude dining room chandelier. That should be in the broker remarks. And that's not enough just to be in the broker remarks. When you get a contract, it needs to be in the contract. The MLS is not our contract. So just because you wrote in the MLS that you're excluding a chandelier, if it's not specifically excluded in our purchase agreement, it's not excluded. So start by putting in the broker remarks so that the agents know. And then when you get an offer, make sure it's specifically stated in that purchase agreement that it's excluded. Okay. Home warranty. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I recommend having a home warranty. It's number one, it's a nice marketing piece to our buyers that we can say, yes, we know that furnace is 23 years old and it's past its life expectancy, but it's currently working just great. So we're not going to replace a working furnace, but we understand you might be concerned about its age, and we're going to give you this home warranty, and it's going to cover you for 12 months. And so let's hope that the furnace does stop working in the first 12 months for you so that you get a new one. So it's a nice marketing piece. It also gives you, and at this point, I'm usually taking out the pamphlet and showing them. It also gives you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, some coverage. And here's what it gives you. And usually, if my sellers are taking advantage of something, it's usually that they're taking advantage of the hot water tank, that they come home and they don't have hot water, and the hot water tank is covered for a seller. So that's probably the number one most used item for a seller. So it does give you a little bit of protection as a seller as well. And it's very and it's a good marketing piece to the buyer. It costs you $499 paid at closing. It doesn't cost you anything up front. And then there's a $100 deductible paid by whoever's making the claim. So if it's a seller claim, you're paying the $100 deductible. If it's after closing and the buyer's making the claim, you've paid the premium, the buyer's paying the deductible. Do you want to offer it? Yes or no? A lot of times people don't want to offer it because they don't feel the need, and they also say, well, we can always negotiate that into the deal later. And that's fine. If that's what you want to do, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you want to make it a negotiable item. We can certainly see if the buyer asks for one. And just know that if you add it later only at a purchase agreement, that you don't get the seller coverage. Only the buyer's getting the benefit of it. So it's up to you. You want to offer it now or later, that's up to you.
So the seller's coverage, if they purchased it when you list the property, if anything happens that's covered under there, then they're covered, and then it transfers over to the buyer for that 12 months also?
Correct. So you're the seller. You say, yes, Rick, I want the home warranty. We're going to sign you up for the seller's warranty at the time of listing. You're going to have to submit that paperwork to America's Preferred so that your client has the coverage during the listing period. So you list it for 6 months. We don't close for 6 months. We don't close for 3 months, whatever. As long as your seller owns the property, they have that coverage. The buyer's getting 12 months of coverage from the date of closing. So from the day that we close until 12 months later, the buyer gets the coverage. But if your seller says, and I've had this actually quite a bit lately, is that no, because it's a seller's market, I don't need to offer that extra $4.99 coverage. Let's just, and if I get a great offer, I'll throw it in there. Sure, I'll throw it in there if I get a really good offer. If they want it and it, okay, great. That's fine. Just know that you're not getting the seller coverage. So we list it, you don't have the coverage, we get an offer, the buyer wants the coverage, it's in the contract that the buyer's getting that warranty, and then before closing, your hot water tank breaks. That's going to be your hot water tank to fix. You're not getting any warranty coverage on it.
Is the price increased when the seller gets the coverage?
No, it's $4.99, same price, no matter what. Yeah, it's still $4.99, whether you have seller coverage or not. It's $4.99. So, and a lot of my sellers are willing to take that bet. All right, point of sale inspections. So before you go on your listing appointment, you should know the municipality. There's a lot of them around Cleveland that have point of sale requirements. Some of them are interior and exterior. Some of them are just exterior. Some of them might just be a sewer dye test or septic inspection. Just know your municipality and then know the requirements before you go on those listing appointments so that you can explain it to your seller because they may or may not know about it. And knowing the requirements, I mean, if you're going on a listing appointment in Shaker Heights, just take that form with you for this, so you can give it to the seller and say, hey, you're going to need to take care of this with the city. Here's the form you need to fill out and take it to the city or email it to the city or whatever the requirement is. And then using that same Shaker Heights example, just know that you should know before you go on the listing appointment. Excuse me. Hey, the Shaker Heights is going to come inside and outside. They're going to give you a list of violations. You can make it violation free and sell it to the buyer violation free, or you can let the buyer assume the violations. Just know that by a buyer assuming violations, especially in Shaker Heights, but other municipalities as well, that it's going to affect the price of your home because Shaker Heights requires 1.5 times an estimate of every single violation, which means if you've got a loose doorknob, and you're making the buyer assume it, we're going to have to get an estimate on that. It's going to be a $5 fix. And if the buyer's assuming it, they're putting $7.50 in escrow. Now, obviously, if it's just a loose doorknob, they're going to fix it and sell it violation free. But if you've got, say $1,000 of estimates, now the buyer can assume it, but the buyer needs $1,500 to put into escrow with the city. So that $1,500 may be the difference between them having enough cash on hand or not. I've sold houses in Shaker that have had probably $10,000 of estimates, and we're talking a lot of money, and that really affected the value of the property by more than just the $10,000 repair cost, right? because you need somebody who has $15,000 of extra cash.
When you do that, do they have to use the same person that gave them the estimate?
No. No, but it has to be in Shaker Heights, as the example, has to be a contractor who's registered in Shaker Heights. And then you have to submit that estimate to the housing director who has to approve it. And again, Shaker Heights being as difficult as they are, and a lot of these contractors know that they're just giving out estimates for free and they're not going to get the job because the homeowner's gonna fix that loose doorknob by themselves. A lot of the contractors are charging now just to come out and give an estimate. They're not.
Oh, so you would have to have a contractor for the doorknob?
Shaker Heights. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Just know the municipality that you're going on this listing appointment in. So Mayfield Heights is very different than Shaker Heights, and Cleveland Heights is different. So just know the municipality before you go on that listing appointment. They all have different requirements. Okay. Security, insurance, and maintenance. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you guys are you're still the owner of the house. You guys will keep the home secure. You're gonna keep insurance on the property. You're gonna maintain the property, keep the utilities on the property. If you need to shut the utilities off, I strongly recommend that you get it winterized, because we get frozen pipes in Cleveland in the winter time. So if you are leaving the house and turning off utilities, make sure that you get the house winterized so that you don't have damage to the property.
Who does that?
Winterize?
Yeah.
A plumber.
Yes, okay, yeah,
Plumber can winter. No, the water department wouldn't. The water department would shut it off, but they're not going to winterize
You
for
have
it.
to winterize first and then they turn it on? They turn it on.
They probably turn it off while the plumber would make sure it's off at the meter. As
Because they have
well.
to drain it, so you have to drain it first, and then turn it?
I don't know
Yeah,
how.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
a plumber would know how to do that job. I have no idea. This paragraph is really more geared towards vacant homes. Obviously your home's vacant. Obviously, if I'm here and I see something, I'm going to call you right away. But just understand, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm not a property manager. I'm not your property manager. And I'm not coming here on any regular schedule to check your home. But if I'm here for a showing and I see there's a frozen pipe or a flood or some problems, obviously I'll call you, but I just don't want you to have that expectation that I'm going to be maintaining your home or keeping an eye on your home. Electronic data security. There's a lot of wire fraud going around right now. I will never ask you to wire any money anywhere. If you ever see an email from me asking you to send a wire, please call me before you send anything, because it's not for me. And that just means that somebody hacked into my email and they saw that you're my client and they're trying to scam you. So please don't wire any funds based on my instructions. And if you get instructions from me to wire, please call me right away so I can change my email passwords.
And Rick will never ask you to buy gift cards.
Yeah, and I will never ask you to buy gift cards.
I got another one of those.
Yeah. Once we sign it, it's a binding agreement. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if everything looks good, I'm going to ask you to sign here and I will sign here. Okay. Any questions about any more other questions about the listing agreement? No. Okay. Next is our property disclosures. State of Ohio makes everybody fill this out. You're gonna initial the bottom of every single page. It's fairly self-explanatory. You know, you have public water or you're on well or whatever, check the right boxes. On this section, I'll usually tell my clients, you know, it asks you if there's lead paint. Yes, no, or unknown. I recommend not check. If you don't think you have lead paint, I recommend checking unknown. Unless you've had your whole house checked for lead and you know that there's no lead in the house, then check no. But if not, then check unknown. Same thing with asbestos and formaldehyde and radon gas. If you don't know, I usually tell people, I can't tell you how to fill this out, but checking no to these things is
Means for sure you know no.
right, exactly. So if you think it's a no, you might be better off checking unknown. Okay. That's the 6 pages of property disclosures. I'm gonna jump through. Here is, you were asking me about the exemption. So this is a form available in Loop, because it's not a required form for a sale in the state of Ohio, but it is going to be a required form for us because when you submit for your commissions, you have to have a property disclosure. And if you have an exemption from it, that's fine. But we're not going to know when we're auditing the file, and it's going to just slow down your commission check. So for us, if there's an exemption, you should use this form. Property address, your seller's name, and here's your 7 exemptions. That's transfer pursuant to a court order such as probate or bankruptcy. Then you're exempt from disclosure. A transfer by a lender who acquired the property by a deed in lieu of foreclosure. They don't have, so any REO properties would not be subject to a residential property disclosure. Transfer by an executor, a guardian, a conservator, or a trustee does not require disclosure. If it's new construction, it does not require a disclosure. Transfer of a buyer who has lived in the property for at least 1 year prior to the sale. So if you're selling it to a tenant, or maybe it's a child who's lived in the property, if they've been living there for at least a year, then you don't have to disclose to them. Transfer of somebody who's inherited the property and not lived there within the last year. Then they don't have to do the disclosure. And if it's a transfer by a government entity, then it does not require disclosure. So those are the only 7 exemptions. Notice an investor who's never lived in the property is not on this list of exemptions. So, by the way, I'm selling a house now, exempt number 6. They just inherited, mom passed away. They haven't lived in the property for at least a year, and they just inherited the property. So they are exempt, and I'm using this form. And I've also told them, by the way, if you know of anything that would otherwise, any material defects or material facts about the property, you're still required to disclose it. If you know that you helped mom clean up the flood in the basement last year, just because you're exempt from the disclosure because of this circumstance, you still have knowledge of that. You still need to disclose that.
So do you put that on a form, the disclosure form, or do you disclose it somewhere else?
Either way, I would say just make sure that you disclose it. So if you want to disclose it in an email, if you want to have the exemption, but just I mean, you could even just have the seller write a letter, write something saying that, you know, sometime in the last year, when my mom still owned the property, the basement flooded. You can do that. Let me jump back to this disclosure too, because something else that people often miss is the last question, other known material defects. If there's anything that your seller knows about the property that would, here's the litmus test for if it requires disclosure is, would the buyer not purchase the property, or would their offer have been any different had they known this fact? That's where you should put it on here. And I'm bringing this up now because I've also had a couple properties, and I've had agents call me and ask me this as well, about death in the property. If it's a death, for a natural death, it does not require disclosure. But if it's anything other than natural causes, it needs to be disclosed. So I've had a couple people selling houses for somebody else where there was a suicide, or if it's a murder, if it's anything other than natural causes, it needs to be disclosed. By the way, the 2 times I've had suicides on the property, the surviving spouse has not been comfortable putting that on the disclosure form because that disclosure form is getting uploaded into the MLS and it's going out there to everybody to know about. So what we've done, and this is perfectly legal, is I had it on a separate disclosure sheet, did not put it onto this disclosure form. She wrote a separate note explaining that whatever happened. When you would call me and say, hey, Rick, I'm writing an offer, or maybe you've sent me an offer, I'm going to say, great, before we go any further, here's an additional disclosure. We didn't want to put it on the MLS for the entire world to know about it, but if we're negotiating, you need to know about this. And that's a perfectly acceptable way to disclose those things. Lead paint disclosures, make sure that you're initialing here, that you've informed your client of their obligation to disclose if they have any knowledge of lead in the house. Most people are filling this form out that they have no knowledge and no reports. I expect that's going to start to change now that more and more communities are adopting the lead safe programs. So right now it's Cleveland, and I think Cleveland Heights has adopted it. I'm not sure if it's in effect yet or not, but so there may be instances where people have tested for lead in the home and they might start having knowledge or reports. But you've initialed here that you've explained to the seller their obligation. Make sure your seller signs, make sure you sign. It's the warranty order form that is a required form in our brokerage. The reason this is a required form in our brokerage is because America's Preferred Home Warranty will help us if there's a lawsuit with a particular transaction. They will help pay for our legal defense. We don't have to have a home warranty for them to assist us. They just need to see that the client was given an opportunity to take a home warranty. So if they've accepted the home warranty, you're going to have them sign up here when you take the listing. If they're choosing not to have a home warranty, that's fine. They sign down here in the waiver, and this is a required form no matter what.
What's the name of it?
This is the America's Preferred Home Warranty order form. APHW order form. That's everything I got for today's class. Do you guys have questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, no, that's fine.
I'm so full.
Let me just check the chat. There's nothing in the chat. Okay. If nobody on Zoom has questions, nobody in the room has questions. If nobody on Zoom has questions, then we're all set. And you guys can certainly reach out to me anytime that you do have, you guys think of something later, feel free to reach out to me. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, the listing agreement form is going to be changing in the next probably 60 days or so. So I would encourage once we have that new form, we're going to have a class on that, and I would recommend that everybody comes back to that class to learn the new form. Okay.
I had a question about the ABA. Does that need to be sent to everybody?
Not at the time of listing.
Okay.
No, I mean, so no, I throw mine in there when I go on a listing appointment, but it's not required. You guys don't have to. The reason I do an ABA is just so that I have an opportunity to explain to the seller that, hey, when given an opportunity to direct the business to one title company or the other, I choose this title company. Excuse me, because I'm a shareholder, and I'm a shareholder because they do a good job taking care of my clients. And we're not going to use the title company until we have a buyer. But I just want to make sure that there's a disclosure out there that I do have a relationship and I do have a financial benefit when we use this title company. By the way, if you don't have your own ABA, then you can just still present it the same way. You can say that my brokerage has a financial interest in it. The only requirement for that ABA, though, that's how I present it, but that's not a requirement. The only requirement is when we have a purchase agreement, if we're using American Title Solutions, it's required to be in there. And if you have your own ABA with a different title company and you're using that title company, then that should be included in your forms as well. But if I wrote you an offer and we're using a different title company that's not our affiliate, then there's no requirement to have that ABA included in anything.
Is that Kirsten?
Yes.
Congratulations on.
Oh, congratulations on the listing.
No?
Yeah, we're other
Am I
cameras.
here?
Yeah, cameras on.
Oh, hello.
Okay.
Any other questions today?
I had a question on offer to purchase.
Okay.
If we want to flip over there, line 57. I just want to confirm that that's a week before closing.
Sure. And by the way, I'm teaching the offer. It's about our purchase offers.
I know, but I still want.
Oh, it's about line 57, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And by the way, I'm teaching this class next month too. So I
Okay.
think it's next month. I have another class coming up next month. So yeah, so the financing section, the way I fill this out is, so the first blank is when does your client need to make formal loan application? I always do 5 days. You can do more or less, just make sure that they do make the loan application and the loan commitment date by, when I present this to my buyers, I always tell them I'm going to make this date line up with our closing date, because that's your finance contingency. So if we're closing in 45 days, then your loan commitment is going to be 45 days. I tell that to my buyer. I say, I do this to protect you so that you have the finance contingency all the way up till the end. However, I also tell my buyer that that may not be the most reasonable thing for me to ask for. And if we're doing a 45-day closing and the listing agent wants us to tighten that up, I always tell them as long as it's 21 or 30 days, I wouldn't go shorter than that. That would be reasonable. But at the same time, I'm not representing the seller, so I want to try to give them protection all the way till the very last minute to close. So you can either do the date of closing, or you can put 45 days after acceptance. That's how I like to fill it out. And every once in a while, a listing agent will call me out on it and say, hey, that's not very reasonable to give yourself 45 or 60 days for a finance contingency. And I would tell my buyers up front that if they counter that to be 21 days, that's fine.
Okay, so you put 5 days in line 56 and then whatever day you close?
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
But again, if I'm writing you an offer today that's closing on July 31st, I'm sorry, June 31st, roughly 45 days. June, there's only 30 days. June 30th, 45 days from today, right? That's how I would fill it out. I would say loan commitment by June 30th. Down here, I would have the closing date, funds and docs due June 30th. And that's how I'm going to present the offer to the listing agent. And if the listing agent comes back and says, hey, we have to have a loan commitment, we have to know that your financing is in place earlier than that, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to get back in a counter offer. And I wouldn't make it 14 days. I wouldn't accept a counter offer today that says we have a loan commitment by May 30th. But in 3 weeks from now, whatever date that is, that's 1, 2, 3, by June 4th. That seems reasonable to me.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming today, and I'll hopefully see you guys on Wednesday at our office meeting, and next month I'll have another class.